Hello, my name is Miriam Tarcov, and I recently published a book entitled Suddenly Without Warning, A Mother's Journey Through Grief. I'd like to thank the Boulder Bookstore for inviting me to do a Q&A. Thank you so much. And about the bookstore, it's a gem, uh, a very rare bookcase, independently owned, bookstore, independently owned. It's a mecca for lovers of books of all ages. So to begin, my book is about my journey through grief. My 18-year-old son died suddenly in a car accident in 1987. The book reveals my journey over a 30-year period. It's very raw, very intimate. It's about love, loss, death, and it's about renewal and transformation. When my son died back in 1987, I had already been a student of Tibetan Buddhism. So it was instinctual that my meditation practice, my study was completely infused with my experience of loss. You will also read about my daughter. I chronicle her path of grief as well. She was 14 years old when she died, and we were each other's grieving partners. Boulder Bookstore provided me with a few questions that I'd be delighted to answer. First question being, what inspired me to write the book? I wouldn't say it was so much an inspiration. It was a necessity, a need to chronicle all of the memories that I had of my son, because I know memories are so fragile that in time they start disappearing or transforming into something else that perhaps did or didn't happen. A dear friend encouraged me to write, and thanks to her and my need to write, I did. I wrote for over 18 months. I had in the back of my mind, since I had been a published author, maybe this could be a book for others to offer companionship on their journey to on grief. But I realized I was too raw. I couldn't start editing and writing and crafting a book at that time. About 2.5 years ago, again, I was encouraged by a friend to return to my journal and make it a book that perhaps it might be of benefit to some people. And I knew if I didn't do it now, I would never do it. Look at me. It took over 2 years to write the book. My intention, my inspiration or intention was to give my family, especially, a greater idea and understanding of what Josh was like, because many of them never met Josh, especially my grandchildren. And also, I had an inspiration that perhaps I could offer comfort to others. Next question that I was asked to answer is, was the process of writing about this terrible time in your life painful or healing? Honestly, it's not an either or situation. Obviously, there was pain, there was sorrow, especially when I first started writing over 35 years ago. But I have an issue with healing. Healing infers some kind of recovery, like recovering from an illness or a fever, but you don't recover from losing a loved one. There's no going back to normal. Well, I think that covers that one. But I would say the process of writing, both at the time shortly after my son's death and when I returned to it, writing really gave me clarity, greater clarity, and greater strength in moving through the grief process. Uh, I was able to express things that I might not have, because certainly when I was writing the first time, it was an absolute stream of consciousness. I had so much to pour out. And I still, upon returning to it just a couple of years ago, there was more reflection that I had. Obviously, I had matured a bit. uh, Next question is, why did I think it was important for me to tell the story? There have been many, many, many books on grief and books on the loss of a child. I understand that, and I've read a few, to say the least. I share this, I think it's important because I not only chronicle my path, I really do chronicle my daughter's. She was an adolescent with tons of questions and confusions and decisions on how she would act and behave, and ultimately as an adult. And I think that's unique to see both paths in one volume. Also, because I had been a practicing Buddhist for so many years, you're really seeing, the reader will see that my path of grief is really seen through a Buddhist lens. And I think seeing a story through a Buddhist practitioner's experience is a perspective that's worthwhile to share with others who have lost a loved one, as well as their family and friends. I'm not claiming to be a brilliant practitioner or a super accomplished Buddhist. It is my offering. Another question I was asked is, what are a few of the ways that your Buddhist training helped you through your grief? A very traditional Buddhist daily contemplation, which I practiced, is the contemplation of the truth of impermanence. And part of the contemplation goes like this: joyful to have such a human birth, but death is real, comes without warning. This body will be a corpse. Practicing this contemplation really seeps into you, into me. And certainly living with the understanding of impermanence, be it conceptual or experiential, this daily practice of contemplating impermanence is an excellent antidote to our death-denying culture, our desire to look young. Heaven forbid we look old, but it's changing. And another important piece of my Buddhist training is the practice of one taste, and that's a little more subtle. I focused really, mine strongly focused my experience on joy. Before Josh died, I think I had a sort of a kindergarten naive level of joy, that when you experience joy, that's all there is just, aha, joy. Once I had a searing loss, the joy and sorrow, which tend to be opposites, became just one experience. Because when I experience joy, I intuitively understand that joy can be momentary, that joy isn't some naive kindergarten playground. It is that too. but it's more than that. It's deeper. Uh, it's really joy and sorrow become one. I don't mean to sound dark or so on, but actually, my experience of joy is richer at this point. I must add a PS that yes, I became a little wiser, a little more appreciative of life, the preciousness of life, and the preciousness of joy. But that gift was given to me by the death of my son. And I wish that gift was my son's death wasn't a catalyst for that gift. I'm sure you can understand that. A couple of books I was asked to tell you about of what I've been enjoying reading. Whoops. One is Breath by James Nestor. Excuse me for 1 second. Sorry. It's called Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art. And it's a fascinating book. It shows you how extraordinary and rich the act of breathing really is. And his book is based on history of breath techniques. It's brilliant. I highly recommend it. Second book is A Day in the Sun by Ivan Arguelles, my ex-brother-in-law. He was a very accomplished poet, and A Day in the Sun is all of his poetry in this book revolves around goodbyes and transition in a multitude of ways. And his imagery is so rich. I recommend that as well. Finally, I was asked to read a few passages from my book. And with your permission, from Suddenly Without Warning. There is a hard-won education that grief provides, a wisdom discovered only by experiencing its rites of passage. Although it was an uncharted course for us, this journey has been well traveled. I had worked through the pain of mourning. For those in grief, my best advice is to allow your innate intelligence to support you through your journey of grief. Let your pain of grief into your heart of compassion and loving kindness. Death brings an openness to the survivors with no expectations. Acknowledging death is accepting the discontinuity of life. It's unsettling and at the same time liberating. This doesn't mean that life is meaningless. On the contrary, it becomes all the more precious. Although there is an end to the pain of grief, mourning continues. It's neither maudlin nor melodramatic to simply say that I will always mourn Josh. To mourn is to remember. And finally, I worked through challenges that had once seemed unimaginable to me. During the first few years following Josh's death, I experienced a cycle of molting and reintegration. My channels of grief's pain had dissolved into my bloodstream, much like the image I saw on the morning of what would have been Josh's 19th birthday, an umbilical cord slowly drying and falling away. There have been continual letting goes, all the goodbyes and loosening of the maternal bonds of attachment. How extraordinary it is to realize that it is healthy to let go of my grief. Let it rest in the realm of history and distant dreams. The giving up of grief can be the greatest challenge of mourning. Grief can so effortlessly become a substitute for the loved one who has died. But in grief, there are no exchanges of love. I am not the same woman. Although I am now a mother who has lost a precious son, this identity is not solid or paralyzing. Losing Josh does not create chains of inhibiting my spontaneity. I am still creating. I can feel the exhilaration of accomplishment, the frustration of failure. I have learned the pitfalls of expectations, of hope and fear. Well, that's it. I do want to thank you for taking the time to watching this, and I want to thank again Boulder Bookstore for inviting me to do an author Q&A. Bye.